Hey, it's Ben Wise from ZOAR Fitness, and today I want to talk about doing sprint work on the rower. So the biggest thing with sprint work is that we want to get to the highest output possible. However, not just that, we also want to have that to be able to transfer to other longer efforts that we're doing so it can actually transfer over to more sustainable work or endurance type work. So I'm going to take that both approaches of producing maximal power, but also thinking that we can transfer this to more endurance-based protocols. The first thing that we have to realize is that when we're doing sprint work, we want to maximize our stroke rate. So the number of strokes that we're doing per minute, we want that to be as high as possible, provided that we're not losing power on each individual stroke. So to maximize our stroke rate, the biggest thing we have to do is minimize the amount of seat slide that we're using. So the amount that slide is actually moving on the rower rail is going to be a little bit less. So basically you're hinging more at your hip when you're doing sprint work, and when you're doing more sustainable, like traditional longer intervals, you're gonna be doing a nice long slide with a lot more compression in the catch. So when you're doing sprint work, you might realize that the handle's only gonna get to maybe over top of your feet, whereas normally it's gonna get maybe 6 inches or more past there. And that just allows for you to turn this over at a much quicker rate, where you might get up to maybe 45 or 50 strokes per minute in the sprint effort, where typically in endurance work, you're never gonna get over maybe 35 or 40, even if it's a really hard, fast turnover type thing. And if it's more enduring than that, you might be down well under 25 even strokes per minute. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a biggest turnover, highest strokes per minute that we can. So that's gonna be the first thing, is that we have that nice hip hinge and we're maximizing the number of strokes that we're doing per minute. And as a part of that, you're gonna see that the heels stay relatively down. So typically we're trying to maximize the amount of slide that we can get in a nice long stroke. And in order to do that, we have this big compression in the front of the catch, and the heels get a little bit of daylight under them as a result of that. However, when we're doing the sprint work, we keep the heels down in contact with the pads, and that kind of promotes that hip hinge and promotes, again, both access to posterior and anterior, like glutes, hamstrings, and quads, right? So that's the combination that we're looking for. So I'm gonna demo both the version of more sustainable type stroke that's going to be at a little bit lower of a strokes per minute stroke rate, and then I'll also demo more of a sprint style technique that you could be using in sprint work. So then the last thing you might want to consider in terms of differences in sprint and sustain work is that you might want to prescribe a certain cap to your stroke rate if you're someone who is intending to have this sprint work carry over to more endurance-based protocols or time domains. So specifically what I mean is, for example, you might say on these intervals that you're doing that are each, maybe 30 or 45 seconds or a minute long, make sure that you stay below 35 or 30 strokes per minute, for example, where that's encouraging that athlete to use the technique specifically that they would use for a more endurance-based effort, because they're gonna get that full compression in the catch, and they're gonna have a nice slower recovery, and they're gonna have to maximize the drive of each individual stroke instead of maximizing their stroke rate like they would for sprint work. So that's another stylistic thing that you might need to think about in terms of doing this. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And as always, head over to ZOARfitness.com for movement breakdowns and programming for the sport of fitness.